New breaking news from the Action Newsroom. A federal grand jury has indicted former Detroit Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick.
Let's get right to Action News reporter Heather Catalo. She's live. Latest for us. Heather, what have you heard?
Carolyn, former Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick has been indicted on fraud and tax charges. This just happened moments ago. We watched as the foreman of the federal grand jury went in front of the magistrate and presented 2 indictments. What we can tell you right now, as far as the tax charges go, he's indicted by the federal grand jury with 10 counts of mail fraud, 3 counts of wire fraud, 5 counts of filing a false tax return, and 1 count of tax evasion. Now, each of those counts carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison and a fine of $250,000. So what this really entails is his activities with the Kilpatrick Civic Fund, which, of course, you know, the Action News investigators have covered the Kilpatrick Civic Fund for many, many years and the alleged misuse of those funds. It was supposed to be sort of a community organization group to help promote leadership and such in the city of Detroit. But what the federal government has learned is that they allege that Kilpatrick used the Civic Fund to provide money to friends and relatives and to pay for items such as counter surveillance and anti-bugging equipment, yoga and golf lessons, golf clubs, summer camp for his children, personal travel, moving expenses, and car rentals. Once again, this indictment just came down. We are just getting it right now, but Kwame Kilpatrick indicted on tax and fraud charges here at the federal court today. Now, what I'm not exactly clear about is that the foreman of the federal grand jury did say 2 indictments, and I think this is only 1 right now, so perhaps there is still another one under seal. We're going to be going through this paperwork to try to get that clarified, but he did mention 2 indictments, so could there be another person that they've also indicted today? That is possible, but if it's under seal, we're not going to know. I can tell you we've been down here since about 8 o'clock this morning, and we've been standing outside the room where the grand jury convenes. Around 1 o'clock, we saw the FBI special agent in charge of this case enter the grand jury area. We also saw the U.S. attorney who's in charge of this case enter that same area, and then within about an hour, hour and a half, we were told to head down to the duty court, which is where the magistrate is, and that is where this all unfolded. So once again, former Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick indicted on tax and fraud charges here in downtown Detroit. Reporting live at the federal courthouse. Yes,
Heather,
Carolyn.
one quick question for you, because you just did an investigation where they asked you to bring up the debate that he had with Gil Hill, and he was talking about the way his civic funds were paid. So obviously, the feds did need that information maybe to wrap up this indictment.
That's right. We believed that the Civic Fund was what they were after in that debate. Of course, they talked about a lot of different things in that debate, but the thing that stood out to us was the questions about the Civic Fund, and he made very clear statements in that, and they are going to very clearly probably use those statements he made on our air back when that debate took place. They're probably going to be using those at trial if and when this goes to trial.
And you said there's 19 charges: mail fraud, wire fraud, false tax returns, and each of those carries 20 years, $250,000.
Each fraud count carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison and a fine of $250,000. Each tax count carries a maximum sentence of 3 or 5 years and a fine of $250,000. So again, appears to just mainly be dealing with the Civic Fund and some tax-related issues with that. As we all have heard over the years, the Public Corruption Unit with the FBI is investigating many, many other issues alleged with the Kilpatricks and some family members and some of the major players that we've known throughout the city the last several years. So the grand jury may not be done yet. We had heard that something might be happening today, and sure enough, this happened. But like I said, there were 2 indictments presented to the magistrate. I haven't had a chance to look through this, but I'm only seeing 1 right here in my hand. I will get that clarified, but perhaps, like I said, another one's under seal and there's more to come.
All right, Heather. Well, we know this is breaking news, and we know you're down there to cover it, and we'll have a complete wrap-up on Action News at 5. I know. So, and I know we've seen his mom, Congresswoman Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick. She's had to testify under oath about things involving her son, the former mayor, and, of course, even her ex-husband, Bernard Kilpatrick. So we have no idea exactly what unfolded there.
And they're talking about basically the misuse of funds without Kilpatrick's Civic Fund, using some of that money to give money to friends and to relatives, and also to pay for some personal expenses. So that seems to be the target of this federal grand jury indictment. 19 charges, including mail fraud, tax charges, 10 mail fraud, 3 wire fraud, 5 false tax returns, and 1 on a tax return charge as well.
And Heather, we know you've been following this case from the very beginning. I mean, I know you haven't had a chance to talk to a lot of people because you've been there gathering information since 8 a.m. But what do you think? I mean, was this expected? You've talked to so many people behind the scenes. I mean, were they thinking this was going to come down?
Well, there's been a lot of speculation about the timing of this. Apparently, there are some timing issues with the grand jury that I'm not really able to get into, but it does sound like things are heating up. And we've been hearing from a variety of different people about who's been coming down to testify, when they've been coming down to testify, and the types of information they've been gathering. For example, asking for the debate from us. My understanding is that's not something that you're going to need at the beginning of an investigation. It's something you're kind of getting near the end to tie up loose ends. And very clearly, they just asked for that a couple weeks ago, and here we are. They're talking about the civic fund. They're talking about tax charges. Again, there are other things that are being investigated, though, so it is unclear if there will be more than this tax and fraud charges. Certainly there are a lot here, but frankly, I'm a little surprised there's only one name on this so far. So we'll see. There's definitely more to come, but the timing, things do seem to be ramping up.
Heather, any idea when Kwame Kilpatrick may be back before a judge concerning this? We know he's behind bars right now.
Put your hands behind back, sir.
That's correct. So clearly it won't be very difficult for them to get him back here. I'm not exactly sure on how long that will take. They probably have to make some arrangements with the Department of Corrections to get him back from the state prison to be arraigned on all of this. So I would imagine within a couple of days. We did actually, his attorney was in the building earlier today. I did not get a chance to talk to him. I do know he was here. So we, of course, we'll reach out to him and see if he's been contacted and see if he has any sense of the timing on that. But I'm sure it will happen relatively soon.
Yeah, Heather, now you mentioned there are 2 indictments, and so it's your indication that you might think another person might be involved in this as well. Now, I realize you haven't read through all the papers. You know, we've kind of rushed you to get this information on the air.
No, that's okay. We wanted to get this information on the air. It's certainly very significant. I'm going to flip through this indictment and see if there's something. There's certainly many counts within it, but my understanding, what I heard in there was that they said 2 indictments. So I will get that clarified. Again, we were just trying to get this on the air as fast as possible because we've all been, you know, trying to figure out what's been happening with this, and we wanted to get this to people as soon as possible because we know there's been a great deal of interest in this particular case. So I will get that clarified, but they did mention too that it could be, but grand juries meet on other things as well, so perhaps it's completely unrelated. We'll get to the bottom of that if we can. If it's under seal, we're not going to know. But
so okay, all right. Thank you so much, Investigator Heather Catallo. Of course, following the latest developments with former Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick. As we've just learned, he's been indicted on 19 federal counts ranging from mail fraud to wire fraud to tax evasion. We'll have a complete wrap up for you on Action News at 5.
And we'll see you.